Hello, my dear students. Wishing a very good morning. Now, do you remember what we have been discussed in the previous classes? Yes, on the last class, we have been discussed about divisibility by different numbers. We have been discussed about divisibility by 2, 4, 8, then divisibility by 5, 10, then 3, 6, 9, and finally divisibility by 11. Okay. Now, today we are going to discuss about some properties of divisibility. We are going to discuss about some properties of divisibility. And these properties of divisibility would help you for the better understanding of what is actually divisibility, and also it would helps to find the divisibility by some other numbers also. It would be helpful for checking the divisibility by some other numbers also. And here there are four properties of divisibility we have to discuss today. So let's discuss them one by one. Here comes the first property related with the divisibility. And what is, just read it, divisibility by factors. And what is the property saying? The property saying that if a number is divisible by another number, then it is also divisible by each of the factors of that number. So let's make it understood by taking an example. Suppose there is a number 24, and you know that 12 is a factor of 24, or we can say that 12 is divisible by Okay, now let's take an example and understood about what is actually referred by this rule. Okay, so I got a number 24, and I know that 24 is divisible by 12. This is the first condition of our rule. A number is divisible by another number. Here the number 24 is divisible by 12. Then, now consider this 12 and the factors of 12. Which are the factors of 12? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and finally 12. Out of that, this 1 and 12 we do not want to consider. Now consider these 2, 3, 4 and 6, which are the factors of 12, and hence it is the number 24 is also divisible by all these factors also. We can say that the number 24 is divisible by 2, the number 24 is divisible by 3, and it is divisible by 4 and 6. Why? Because all these 2, 3, 4 and 6 are factors of 12, and 12 is divisible by and the number 24 is divisible by 12. Okay, so if the number 24 is divisible by 12, then the same number 24 is divisible by all the factors of this number 12, which means the same number 24 is divisible by 2, 3, 4 and 6 also. Okay, this is the first rule. 70. Now taking another example, which pair now you can take this number 2 and this number 7 can be taken as a pair. So that 2 into 7 which would be equal to 14 also would be a factor of 70. Okay, so if you got some co-prime factors of a particular number, then you can find some other factors by multiplying or by taking the product of those co-prime factors. That is what is observed here. Okay, so I hope you clear about the second property of divisibility. Here is the third property of divisibility. So what is it? Divisibility of sum of numbers. Just read it. If a number is a factor of two given numbers, it is also a factor of sum of the two numbers. Let's take an example and understood what is the property really mean to be. Okay, so I got 5 is a factor of 20. You know that 5 is a factor of 20. Why? Because we can write 5 into 4 equals 20. So 5 is a factor of 20. Okay. Now I am taking another example which is 5. The same number 5 is a factor of 35 also. Why? Because you know that the 35 can be written as 5 into 7. 5 7s are 35. Again we can say that 5 is a factor of 35. So the same number 5 is a factor of 20 as well as it is a factor of 35. Now I am going to consider the sum of these two given numbers, which is 20 plus 35. Now what would be the answer? 20 plus 35 would be 55. And you know that 55 can be written as 5 into 11. 5 11s are 55. Since it can be written as 5 into 11, we can say that 5 is a factor of 20 plus 35, the sum of the two given numbers. So that is what is referred here. If a number is a factor of two given numbers, 5 is a factor of two given numbers. Here is the third property of divisibility. So what is it? Divisibility of sum of numbers. Just read it. If a number is a factor of two given numbers, it is also a factor of sum of the two numbers. Let's take an example and understood what is the property really mean to be. Okay, so I got 5 is a factor of 20. You know that 5 is a factor of 20. Why? Because we can write 5 into 4 equals 20. So 5 is a factor of 20. Okay. Now I am taking another example which is 5. The same number 5 is a factor of 35 also. Why? because you know that the 35 can be written as 5 into 7. 5 sevens are 35. Again we can say that 5 is a factor of 35. So the same number 5 is a factor of 20 as well as it is a factor of 35. Now I am going to consider the sum of these two given numbers, which is 20 plus 35. Now what would be the answer? 20 plus 35 would be 55. And you know that 55 can be written as 5 into 11. 5 11s are 55. Since it can be written as 5 into 11, we can say that 5 is a factor of 20 plus 35, the sum of the two given numbers. So that is what is referred here. If a number is a factor of two given numbers, 5 is a factor of two given numbers 20 and 35. Okay. Now it is also a factor of sum of the two numbers. Then it would be a factor of sum of 20 and 35. What is sum of 20 and 35? Which is 55. So 5 is a factor of 55 also. Okay. So that is here referred in the third property of divisibility. This is the fourth property related with the divisibility. And it is just the reverse case of the third property. And you can see that it is divisibility of difference of numbers. On previous property we discussed about divisibility of sum of two numbers. Here we are going to discuss about the divisibility of difference of two numbers. Okay. So first we can read, first of all the statement we can read. You can see that if a number is a factor of two given numbers, it is also a factor of the difference of the two numbers. So first of all we are going to take a number 5, and 5 is a factor of 20, as you know. Now again 5 is a factor of 35 also, we discussed in the previous example. Okay, so 5 is a factor of 20 and 5 is a factor of 35 also. On the previous example we considered the sum of these two numbers. Here we are going to consider the difference of these two numbers. What would be the difference? Greater minus smaller you can do. So 35 minus 20, which would be 15. And you know that 15 you can write it as 5 into 3. Okay, so we can say that 5 is a factor of 15, or 5 is a factor of, what is this 15? How did you got this 15? You got this 15 as 35 minus 20. Okay, so 5 would be a factor of the difference of the given two numbers. That is the property referred here. Clear? Listen here. The third and the fourth property, we can generalize them and say with the help of algebra. Okay, so the third property can be generalized as, if A is a factor of two numbers, B and C, then A is a factor of sum of those two numbers. Sum of which two numbers? Sum of B and C, which is B plus C. This is the third statement or third property. Now what about the fourth property? How we can write it? If A is a factor factor of both B and C, then A is a factor of the difference of these two numbers, which would be B minus C also. Okay, so the third and fourth property can be generalized as like this. Okay, sometimes some statements can be given like this, then you should have to identify them, and you have to be able to state whether such statements are true or false. Okay, so I hope you clear about this. Look at here, we are going to discuss a problem related with our third and fourth properties. Okay, so first of all, just read and understood the question very well. A number which is a factor of two numbers is given below. So a number which is a factor of two numbers is given below. Okay, show that this number is also a factor of sum of the two numbers as well as factor of the difference of the two numbers. So we have been given a number, and that number is factor of two other numbers. Now you should have to prove or show that this number is also a factor of sum of these two numbers as well as difference of these two numbers. So let's do it. Okay, first of all, the given numbers are 234 and 54. What do you want to do first? You need to find the sum of the two numbers. So sum of the numbers. Sum of the two numbers. What would be the sum? 234 plus 54. What would be the answer? 234 plus 54 would be 288. Okay. Now you need to show that this 288 is a 288 is divisible by 3, or 3 is a factor of 288. Okay, how can you say it? For checking the divisibility by 3, what was the method for checking the divisibility by 3? For checking the divisibility by 3, we need to find the sum of the digits. And if the sum of the digits is a multiple of 3, then that number also would be divisible by 3. Okay, so what would be the sum here? 2 plus 8 plus 8, which would be 2 plus 8, 10, 10 plus 8 would be 18, is divisible by 3. 18 is a multiple of 3, so we can say that 18 is divisible by 3. So we can also say that 288 is also divisible by 3. Or in reverse, we can say that 3 is a factor of 288. Okay, so 3 is a factor of sum of the two numbers. Now we want to check the difference. First of all, we considered the sum. Now we want to consider the difference. So difference of two numbers. Greater minus smaller, you can do 234 minus 54. What would be the answer? 180 would be the answer. And you know that sum of the digits. What would be the sum of the digits here? 1 plus 8 plus 0, which would be 9. And 9 is divisible by 3. Therefore, we can say that 3 is a factor of this greatest number 180, which is the difference of the two given numbers. So it has been shown, or it has been proved that the sum of the numbers as well as the difference of the numbers are divisible by the same number 3. Okay, now let's take another example or another question belong to this category. Okay, the second question is 6 is a factor of 72 and 60. So what do we want to show or prove? We want to prove 6 is a factor of both sum of these 72 and 60 as well as difference of these 72 and 60. Okay, so first of all we can consider sum of the numbers, which would be 72 plus 60, and it would be equal to, what would be 72 plus 60? It would be 132. Okay, now we want to check whether 132 is divisible by 6 or not. So we need to consider the condition, rule for divisibility by 6. And the rule for divisibility by 6 is that for a number has to be divisible by 6, then it must be an even number. First of all, it must be an even number. Then that number must be divisible by 3 also. If a number is divisible by 3 and it is an even number, then that number would be divisible by 6 also. Okay, so let's check. 132 is even. Now we want to check whether this 132 is divisible by 3 or not. So for checking the divisibility by 3, we need to find the sum of the digits. 1 plus 3 plus 2. It would be 6. And you know 6 is divisible by 3. So we can confirm that this number 132 is divisible by 6 also. Or we can say that 6 is a factor of 132. 6 is a factor of 132. Clear? Now what do we want to do? We want to consider the difference of the two numbers. What would be the difference of two numbers? It would be 72 minus 60. Okay. Now what would be 72 minus 60? It would be 12. And you know that 12 is divisible by 6. Because 2 6 are 12. So 12 is divisible by 6. So 12 is divisible by 6, or we can say that 6 is a factor of 12. So we just proved the two conditions. The number 6 is divisible by the sum of the two numbers as well as the difference of the two numbers. Clear? Okay, one more problem we can do. And the third one is 25 is a factor of 625 and 500. So 25 is a factor of 625 and 500. Now what do you want to find? You want to find sum of numbers, and which would be 625 plus 500. What would be the answer? Yes, it would be 6 plus 11, 1125. Now you want to check whether this number is divisible by 25 or not. We can simply divide and check it. Okay, so 1125 divided by 25. On 11 there would not be 25. So we can consider the first three digits 1112. Okay, 112. And out of 112, there would be 425, because 425s are 100. You know that 425s would gives 100. If it is 525, then it would become 125. Okay, but here we have only 112. So how many times 25 occurs? 4 times. Okay, 4 25s are 100, and the remaining would be 12. And we have to drop down this 5, so that it would become 125. And we have been discussed that out of 125, how many 25s would be there? It would be exactly 5 25s. Okay, so 45 into 25, sorry, 5 into 25, which would be 125 itself. So that what would be the remainder? Remainder is 0. Or we can say that 1125 is exactly divisible by 25. Or we can say that 25 is a factor of 1125. Okay, 25 is a factor of 1125. The first thing is proved. Now what about the second thing? You need to consider the difference of numbers. What would be the difference of numbers? Difference of the numbers. It would be 625 minus 500. Can you tell me first what would be the answer? It would be 125. On subtracting, you would get simply the answer would be 125. And you know that 125 can be written as 5 into 25. So it is divisible by 25. Or we can say that 25 is a factor of 125. So what we have done is that we just proved that 25 is a factor of both sum as well as the difference of the two given numbers. Okay, I hope you clear. The homeworks of the same kind would be given for you. All of you should have to done it. There would be some additional problems also given for as your homework, especially some true or false questions. So all of you need to be read and understood the question very well and answer all of them and send it to me. Okay, so let's see in the next class. Bye.